From the moment he was born, little Alexander was untouchable. Not in the way of charm or innocence, but in a way that struck fear into anyone who dared care for him. His cry wasn't the sweet, innocent wail of a baby. It was a storm warning, a thunderclap that seemed to announce, "I am mine, I will have no one else." Nannies came in droves, each one confident, trained, and experienced. But all of them left defeated, humiliated, or in tears. He spat, he scratched, he screamed as if his tiny body contained the fury of 1,000 storms. The mansion, filled with grandeur and gold, echoed not with laughter but with frustration and despair. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the magic of human connection, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. This story will touch the heart of anyone who believes love can break even the coldest walls. Alexander's father, Edward Whitmore, was a self-made millionaire whose wealth had grown like ivy, tangling itself around his life and suffocating anything soft. His mother had passed when Alexander was just a month old, leaving him in a house filled with luxury but absent of warmth. Edward loved his son in the way that some men love trophies from a distance, with pride but never with tenderness. The nannies he hired were instructed to be firm, to discipline the boy if he misbehaved, as though his innocence was a problem to be managed rather than a soul to be nurtured. Every attempt failed. Alexander's wrath was unmatched, a tiny dictator in a crib of silk sheets. Weeks turned into months, and the Whitmore mansion became a revolving door for caregivers. Some lasted a day, some a week, but all eventually left, muttering about the impossibility of the child. The servants whispered about the boy with awe and fear. Even the cooks, who were used to the eccentricities of the wealthy, tiptoed around him as though walking on fragile ice. The house, for all its beauty and opulence, felt cold, empty, and haunted, not by spirits but by loneliness. Then came Rosa. She was not a nanny, nor was she highly trained. She was a maid hired for her honesty and diligence, someone who could clean the grand halls without complaint and keep the house in order. She was poor, not from lack of intelligence but from circumstance, and she carried herself with quiet dignity that made even the stiffest of staff notice her. Her hands were calloused from years of scrubbing floors, her eyes soft yet observant, and her heart, though cautious, was open in a way few could understand. Rosa approached Alexander with none of the nervous awe or practiced tricks of the nannies. She did not try to control him, nor did she show fear when he screamed or spat in her face. Instead, she spoke to him softly, narrating the small tasks of the house, humming old lullabies her mother had taught her, and carrying a warmth that seemed foreign to the cold walls of the mansion. Alexander, of course, reacted immediately. He spat at her, clawed at her dress, and screamed as if warning her to leave before it was too late. Rosa did not flinch. She bent low to meet his tiny eyes and whispered, "It's okay, little one. I won't hurt you." There was no command, no bribe, no attempt at manipulation, just a simple promise. Days passed, and something miraculous began to unfold. Alexander, who had resisted every attempt at connection, began to watch her from his crib. He would grab at her skirts, then pull back, unsure of the strange feeling stirring inside him. One day, in a moment that no one could have predicted, he reached his tiny hand toward Rosa, brushing it against her cheek. And when she leaned close, he pressed his lips gently to her hand. Not in rebellion, not in mischief, but in the purest, most fragile form of affection a child could give. It was a small kiss, yet it carried the weight of mountains. In that instant, Rosa knew that Alexander had found a heart he could trust. The other nannies had failed because they had tried to force love or obedience. Rosa had succeeded because she had simply been human. She had been patient, consistent, and vulnerable in a way that invited trust rather than demanded it. Over the weeks, the transformation grew. Alexander still tested her limits, still had tantrums and storms, but he would calm the moment she entered the room. He would crawl into her arms without fear, allow her to brush his hair, and even laugh. A rare sound in the Whitmore mansion that made Edward pause more than once, feeling a pang of jealousy he didn't understand. The golden crib that had once been a prison now became a sanctuary, a place where warmth and tenderness began to creep back into a home long starved of them. But life, of course, rarely rewards the innocent without challenge. Edward, a man blinded by pride and the need to control, noticed the change in his son with suspicion. He could not understand why a mere maid, a girl from nothing, had won the affection of the child who had spurned every professional caregiver. He demanded explanations, tried to impose rules, and even went so far as to remove Rosa from the house temporarily, fearing she might spoil Alexander with indulgence. The boy's reaction was immediate and raw. He cried inconsolably for hours, pressing his small fists against the door through which Rosa had disappeared, calling out her name with the kind of desperation that pierced Edward's hardened heart. That night, Edward lay awake, listening to the sound of his son's sobs echoing through the halls. For the first time, he felt the depth of a human bond that could not be bought or manufactured, and something inside him began to shift. When Rosa returned, she found Alexander waiting, trembling but overjoyed, as if he had been holding his breath for the longest moment of his life. He reached out and kissed her cheek, this time with more certainty, as though sealing a promise that no one could ever break. Edward watched from the shadows, a strange mix of awe, guilt, and understanding settling over him. It was in those quiet, stolen moments that the mansion began to change. The air, once thick with tension and resentment, softened with laughter, whispered stories, and the patter of tiny feet exploring not just rooms but hearts. Rosa did not wield authority or fear. She offered compassion, patience, and love, and Alexander responded with loyalty and joy that radiated through the halls like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Months turned into years. Alexander grew from a tempestuous baby into a thoughtful, kind-hearted boy, still spirited but no longer consumed by fury. The bond he had formed with Rosa never faltered. He would sit by her side during chores, help her carry laundry, or simply rest his head against her shoulder while she hummed songs from her childhood. She had become more than a maid. She had become the center of his emotional world, the anchor that kept him safe when wealth and expectation threatened to sweep him away. Edward, watching this transformation, began to reconsider everything he thought he knew about power, control, and love. He realized that no amount of money could replace the human heart's need for connection. Rosa, poor and humble in his eyes, had given his son the greatest gift he could never buy: the ability to trust, to feel, and to love without fear. And in doing so, she had transformed not just a child, but a man who had long forgotten what it meant to care without condition. There were still challenges, of course. Society whispered about the impropriety of a millionaire's son being so attached to a maid. Some staff snickered, and Edward's friends offered advice he no longer wanted to hear. But none of that mattered. Within the walls of the Whitmore mansion, the boy who once spat at everyone now offered kisses, hugs, and laughter freely. He had learned the meaning of love through someone who had nothing but gave everything. Years later, when Alexander was old enough to understand the weight of his story, he would often look at Rosa and whisper a single truth that had shaped his life. "You saw me when no one else could. You loved me when I was unlovable." Those words carried with them the echoes of a lonely, storm-filled beginning transformed into a life of warmth, trust, and hope. And Rosa, with tears in her eyes, would smile and remind him, "It was always you who let me in, Alexander. I just waited for the moment your heart was ready." This story is more than just a tale of a spoiled millionaire's baby. It is a reminder that love does not come from wealth, status, or titles. It comes from patience, compassion, and the courage to see value in others, no matter where they come from. Alexander's journey from a tempestuous, mistrustful child to a boy who could love freely is proof that even the most stormy hearts can be softened by kindness. If this story touched your heart, please show it by liking, sharing, and commenting. Let the world know that kindness, patience, and second chances can truly change lives. And before you leave, I'd love it if you shared in the comments which part of Alexander and Rosa's story moved you the most. It will mean so much to me and to anyone reading. Because sometimes, the richest treasures in life are not gold or jewels, but the hearts that love us when no one else can.